I watched them laugh at us across the restaurant. White people snickering at the interracial couple. My date, Gabrielle, stayed calm, even gracious. They didn't know who she really was. And when the most powerful man in the room walked through that door and called her name, their laughter died in their throats. Before I tell you what happened that night, do me a favor. If you believe karma is real and love seeing justice served, hit that like button on right now and subscribe because this story has twists you won't see coming. Trust me on that. It was supposed to be perfect. Our third date, and I'd finally gotten us a reservation at Giovanni's, that upscale Italian place downtown where you need to book weeks in advance, and the candlelight makes everything feel like a movie. I'm David, by the way. 34, an architect, and honestly, I was punching way above my weight with Gabrielle. She walked into that restaurant like she owned the place, but not in an arrogant way. There was just this quiet confidence about her, the way she moved in that deep blue dress, her natural hair perfectly framed around her face. 29 years old and the most beautiful woman I'd ever taken to dinner. But it wasn't just her looks. There was something about her presence, calm, grounded, like nothing could shake her. We were seated near the back, which I'd specifically requested because I'm a bit old-fashioned and wanted some intimacy. The soft music, the smell of fresh bread and wine, everything was setting up to be exactly what I'd hoped for. And for the first 20 minutes it was. We talked about our weeks, laughed about a terrible movie she'd seen, and I was working up the courage to tell her I was falling for her. Then I noticed the table. 8 people, corporate types in their mid-30s to 50s, celebrating something. Loud. Drinking expensive wine like it was water. And they were staring at us. Not the casual glance you give other diners. This was different. The whispers started first. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the way their eyes kept darting to our table, then back to each other. The smirks, the raised eyebrows. Gabrielle noticed too. I saw it in the way her hand paused just slightly before reaching for her water glass. But she didn't say anything. She just smiled at me, that warm smile that made my chest tight, and asked me about the building project I'd mentioned on our last date. That's when the comments started getting louder. A blonde woman with sharp features and too much wine in her system leaned back in her chair and said, "Just loud enough for us to hear, look at that, interesting couple." The emphasis she put on interesting made my stomach turn. The man next to her, expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of guy who definitely introduces himself by his job title, laughed into his wine glass. "Diversity hire made good, I guess," he said, and the table erupted in muffled laughter. My vision went red. I started to push my chair back, ready to walk over there and say something I'd probably regret. But Gabrielle's hand landed on mine, firm, steady. "David, please," she said softly, "and they're not worth it. Let's just enjoy our evening." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw something that made me feel like the smallest man in the world. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't even angry. She was just above it. Like she'd seen this before, dealt with worrying, and decided long ago that people like that didn't get to steal her joy. "How can you just sit here?" I whispered, ashamed at the crack in my voice. "Because I refuse to let ignorance ruin a beautiful night," she said. "The question is whether you can handle it." That cut deeper than anything those people could have said. She was testing me, I realized, not maliciously, but genuinely. Could I handle being with her? Could I handle the stares, the comments, the reality of what it meant to be an interracial couple in a world that still had people like them in it? I sat back down. I picked up my fork, and I tried to focus on the amazing woman sitting across from me instead of the hateful people behind us. But they wouldn't let it go. The comments continued, each one a little bolder than the last. The blonde woman, I later learned her name was Pamela, stage whispered about how she could never be with someone outside her race. Another person made a joke about jungle fever that made the waiter, who was refilling our water, visibly uncomfortable. At one point, the slicked-back hair guy, Brett, I'd find out, actually raised his glass in a mocking toast toward our table. I was shaking. Not from fear, but from pure rage mixed with something worse. Shame. Shame that I'd wanted to leave. Shame that this was probably my first real experience with racism directed at someone I cared about, while Gabrielle had lived it her entire life. Shame that my white privilege meant I could walk away from this situation anytime I wanted, but she couldn't. Walk away from her skin. Gabrielle must have seen something in my face because she leaned forward and started telling me about her work. She'd always been vague about it before. Consulting and international projects were phrases she used a lot. But that night, maybe to distract me, or maybe because she felt I needed to focus on something else, she opened up a little more. She talked about traveling to East Africa, about protocol development, about the satisfaction of solving complex problems. I tried to focus, I really did. But my attention kept drifting to the poisonous table behind us. That's when the restaurant manager appeared. He was a thin man, maybe 50, and he was sweating despite the air conditioning. He approached our table with the kind of nervous energy that told me immediately something was wrong. "Excuse me," he said, his voice apologetic but firm. "I'm terribly sorry, but we've received a complaint about disruption." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "Disruption?" I said. "From who?" He wouldn't make eye contact. "I'm not at liberty to say, but perhaps it would be best if we left," Gabrielle finished for him, her voice still calm but with an edge now. The manager's silence was answer enough. I exploded. I couldn't help it. "Are you serious? We've been sitting here quietly having dinner while that table—" I pointed at the corporate group, who were now watching the scene with barely concealed satisfaction. "Has been harassing us all night, and you're asking us to leave?" "Sir, please keep your voice down." "Keep my voice down? They complained about us? What exactly did we do wrong? Exist?" Gabrielle's hand was on my arm again, but this time it felt different. Not restraining, but grounding. She looked up at the manager with those calm, intelligent eyes and asked a simple question. "Is Giovanni here tonight?" The manager's face went from pink to white in an instant. "Mr. Giovanni?" he stammered. He, he's actually on his way. VIP reservation. Why do you—" "We'll stay then," Gabrielle said simply, as if she had just commented on the weather. The manager opened his mouth, closed it, looked between us like we were a puzzle he couldn't solve, and then retreated without another word. I watched him go, then turned to Gabrielle. "Who's Giovanni?" I asked. She just smiled. "The owner. Let's order dessert." I was completely lost, but something in her demeanor had shifted. There was a spark in her eye now, something that looked almost like anticipation. The corporate table had gone back to their celebration, probably thinking they had won, that we'd be escorted out any minute. They had no idea what was coming. 20 minutes later, the entire atmosphere of the restaurant changed. There was a commotion at the entrance, staff suddenly standing straighter, the hostess practically bowing. And then he walked in. Antonio Giovanni. Even if you didn't know who he was, you'd know he was someone important. 65 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly styled, moving with the confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. And he had. Giovanni Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. The man had developed drugs that saved millions of lives, held patents worth billions, and owned not just this restaurant, but a chain of 30 others, plus resorts across 3 continents. He was the kind of wealthy that made regular rich people look poor. The corporate table immediately perked up. Brett actually stood up, waving like they were old friends. "Antonio, over here," he called out, trying to sound familiar, like they ran in the same circles. Giovanni's eyes scanned the restaurant with the practiced ease of someone who assessed rooms for a living. And then he saw Gabrielle. His entire face transformed. The polite businessman expression melted into genuine joy, the kind of warmth you can't fake. And he walked straight past the corporate table, past Brett's outstretched hand and Pamela's eager smile, and came directly to us. "Dr. Whitmore," he said, his Italian accent adding warmth to every syllable. "What an unexpected honor." The restaurant went silent. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Every fork stopped halfway to every mouth. Gabrielle stood, and Giovanni embraced her warmly, kissing both her cheeks in the European fashion. "Antonio, I had no idea you'd be here, or I would have let you know," she said. "Nonsense. You never need permission to dine at my restaurant," he said. Then he turned to me and I realized my mouth was hanging open. And who is this? Antonio, this is David. David, this is Antonio Giovanni. He shook my hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. Any friend of Dr. Whitmore is family here, he said. Then looking around at the staff, who were all watching with wide shiz, he added, "Why wasn't I told Dr. Whitmore was dining here? Someone should have upgraded their table immediately." Behind us, I hear the sound of Brett slowly sitting back down. The Smirks had vanished from the corporate table. They looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under their entire worldview. I was still stuck on one word. "Doctor?" I said, looking at Gabrielle. Giovanni pulled up a chair without asking, the mark of someone who owned not just the building, but probably the block. "You mean she hasn't told you?" He laughed, rich and warm. "Typical of her. David, do you have any idea who you're dining with?" I shook my head, feeling like I'd walked into the middle of a play without reading the script. "This woman," Giovanni said, gesturing to Gabrielle with obvious pride, "is Dr. Gabrielle Whitmore, the youngest head of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Pioneer in trauma surgery techniques. Published researcher. She just returned from a medical mission in East Africa. Where was it this time, Gabrielle?" "Uganda," she said softly, looking slightly embarrassed by the attention. "Uganda," Giovanni continued, "and she consults with the World Health Organization on pandemic preparedness protocols. The woman is brilliant, an absolute treasure." I felt like someone had replaced my brain with cotton. Gabrielle had mentioned consulting, and I'd imagined maybe business consulting or project management. I'd never thought to push, never wanted to pry. And here she was, not just a doctor, but one of the leading minds in her field. "I don't tell everyone," Gabrielle said, meeting my eyes. "I like to be seen as just Gabrielle first." "But you're not just anything," Giovanni said, his voice turning serious. "5 years ago, my granddaughter had a riding accident. Terrible. Internal injuries that would have killed her before she made it out of surgery at most hospitals. But Gabrielle," his voice caught slightly, "Gabrielle performed an 11-hour surgery and saved her life. My Isabella is in university now because of this woman. My family owes her everything." The weight of his words settled over the table. I looked at Gabrielle and saw her the way Giovanni did. Not as my date, not as the black woman those hateful people had mocked, but as the hero she actually was. "I've been funding her medical missions ever since," Giovanni continued, "and I donated an entire wing at Johns Hopkins in her honor, the Whitmore Center for Trauma Innovation. Have you seen it, David?" I shook my head, speechless. "You should, it's magnificent, though not nearly magnificent enough for what she deserves." He paused, his expression shifting. "Now, Gabrielle, I must ask you something, and please be honest. Has your evening been pleasant?" The question hung in the air. I saw Gabrielle's face, saw her weighing how to answer. She could have lied, smoothed it over, made it easy. Instead, she said simply, "There was an incident, but it's nothing I haven't experienced before." The way she said it, like racism was just whether she'd learned to dress for, made Giovanni's jaw tighten. "What kind of incident?" The manager appeared then, summoned by some invisible signal, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Giovanni turned to him with the kind of cold politeness that was somehow more frightening than anger. "Francesco, Dr. Whitmore has had issues this evening. Please explain." Francesco stammered through an explanation about the complaint, carefully not naming who made it. But Giovanni was no fool. He followed Francesco's nervous glances and turned to look at the corporate table. 8 people suddenly very interested in their dessert plates. "That table?" Giovanni asked. Francesco nodded miserably. Giovanni stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. "Please excuse me for a moment," he said to us. Then he walked toward the corporate table, and I saw Brett's face light up with hope. The idiots still thought Giovanni was coming to greet them properly. "Mr. Giovanni." Brett stood up, hand extended, smile wide. "What a pleasure to finally—" "I understand you complained about that couple," Giovanni said, his voice cutting through Brett's greeting like a blade through silk. He pointed directly at Gabrielle and me. The table froze. Pamela's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Oh, that was just a misunderstanding, she started, trying to laugh it off. What company do you work for? Giovanni asked, his tone conversational, but his eyes ice cold. Westfield Pharmaceuticals. Brad and Merla still not reading the room. We're actually celebrating our quarterly numbers. Best year in company history, largely thanks to our distribution of... He stopped. I watched reality dawn on his face like a slow-motion car crash. Your products. We distribute your products. Yes, you do, Giovanni said. And that woman you spent the evening mocking, the one you complained about to my manager, she saved more lives than your entire company ever will. She's a personal friend. She saved my granddaughter's life. He paused, letting that sink in. I'd like your business cards. All of you. The color drained from every face at that table. Hands fumbled for wallets with the coordination of people who'd suddenly had too much to drink. Cards were passed forward like offerings to an angry god. Giovanni collected them, glanced through them with the casual attention of someone reviewing a grocery list, then returned to our table. He sat down, pulled out his phone, and looked at Gabrielle. Do I have your permission to address this? She hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. He dialed, put the phone on speaker. The voice that answered was brisk, businesslike. Antonio, to what do I owe the pleasure? Lawrence, sorry to call during dinner, but I'm at my restaurant, and I've just had an interesting conversation with some of your employees. There was a pause. Which employees? Giovanni read off the names from the cards. I watched the corporate table, saw 8 people collectively realize their careers were ending in real time. They're here celebrating, the voice on the phone, Lawrence, apparently the CEO of Westfield, said cautiously. Is there a problem? That depends on your definition of problem, Giovanni said. They spent the evening harassing another diner, making racist comments, mocking an interracial couple. They complained to my manager and tried to have the couple removed. Another pause. The woman they were mocking is Dr. Gabrielle Whitmore. The silence on the other end of the phone was so profound I could hear traffic noise in the background. Then, the Dr. Whitmore from Johns Hopkins? The very same. Cristo, Antonio, there are no words. I'm mortified. As you should be, Giovanni said calmly. I'll be sending you the full report from my manager, along with statements from other diners and staff who witnessed the behavior. I trust you'll handle this appropriately. Immediately, Lawrence said, his voice hard now. Those employees are terminated effective immediately. I'll have security meet them when they return. And Antonio, please, extend my deepest apologies to Dr. Whitmore and to her companion. This is unacceptable. I'll pass that along. Oh, and Lawrence, their dinner bill? Send it to Westfield's corporate office, with the full incident report attached. Understood. And Antonio, thank you for calling me directly. I want to know when my people failed to meet basic standards of human decency. Giovanni ended the call and looked at the corporate table. 8 faces, white as sheets, staring back at him. He didn't gloat, he didn't smile. He simply said, your bill will be forwarded to your office. Good evening. Then he turned back to us and his face softened completely. Now let's get you two into a private dining room where you can actually enjoy your evening. Francesco, the Venetian room immediately. And bring them the 2015 Barolo, on me, of course. The next 2 hours were surreal. Private dining room, incredible wine, a meal that tasted like heaven, probably because I could actually taste it without my jaw being clenched in anger. Giovanni stayed for one course, telling stories about his granddaughter and making me promise to take good care of the best human being I've ever met. Before he left, he shook my hand one more time. David, you're with a remarkable woman. The world needs more people who stay gracious in the face of hatred. She could have made a scene, could have torn those people apart with words, but she chose dignity. Learn from her. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When we were finally alone, really alone, I looked at Gabrielle across the table. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. About what you do? Would it have changed how you saw me? She asked back. Yes, I admitted. I mean, I thought you were incredible before, but you're literally saving lives, changing the world, and you're David, she interrupted. The man who stayed, the man who wanted to defend me even when I asked you not to. The man who sat through all of that because you refused to leave me alone in it. She reached across the table and took my hand. That's who you are. That's what mattered to me tonight. I want to tell you that I said something profound in that moment, but the truth is I just held her hand and felt grateful that someone like her could see something worthwhile in someone like me. The epilogue to this story is satisfying in all the ways karma should be. The entire corporate table was terminated the next morning. Brett and Pamela both lost their careers in the pharmaceutical industry. Antonio Giovanni's influence meant that word spread quickly about what they'd done, and no one wanted to touch them. Westfield Pharmaceuticals issued a public apology and donated $250,000 to Gabrielle's medical mission fund. And Antonio Giovanni, he became a friend. He attended our wedding a year later, walked Gabrielle down the aisle because her father had passed when she was young, and gave a toast that made everyone cry about the woman who'd saved his granddaughter and taught him that grace under pressure was the highest form of strength. But the real lesson, the thing I want you to take away from this, is simpler than all of that. You never know who someone is. You never know who they know. You never know what they have accomplished or what battles they have already fought before you met them. That woman those hateful people mocked, she was a hero, a literal lifesaver, and they judged her solely on the color of her skin. Hate costs more than you can imagine. It cost those people their careers, their reputations, their futures. But more than that, it cost them the chance to be in the presence of someone extraordinary and learn something. They could have spent that evening at a nearby table, quietly witnessing love and connection. Instead, they chose mockery and got exactly what they deserved. If this story reminded you that dignity and grace will always win in the end, hit that like button right now. Subscribe for more stories where karma serves justice perfectly. And comment below, have you ever witnessed someone get instant karma? I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their grace under pressure matters, that staying calm in the face of hatred isn't weakness. It's the ultimate strength. And remember, the world is smaller than you think. The person you mock today might be the hero who saves your life tomorrow, or they might be friends with the person who controls your future. Either way, kindness is the only currency that truly matters. That woman I almost lost because I couldn't handle the pressure of other people's racism, she's my wife now, and every single day, she teaches me what real strength looks like. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.